Ladies and gentlemen, this is Internet Personality Vangelus with a surprise stolen Chinese toy review of Transformers Animated Deluxe Swoop. Now, I'll just get my excuse right out of the way. The heroic Hubert, known to some as Heroes Toymaker, has not been on eBay for a while. Then all of a sudden, he showed up with like 50 swoops for a very decent price, in my opinion. I believe he still has some up. However, I will say, don't be a crackhead like me, wait for retail. Anyway, Swoop is a pterodactyl, and a really surprisingly nicely engineered one. I am actually a little blown away. I was expecting your typical toy pterodactyl thing of the legs sticking straight out the back and the wings being completely immobile. Oh, he does one thing that's really cool that I want to point out immediately. You see how he's got... Look at that. He can carry his weapon. Admittedly not in a hidden way, but his feet have a special peg right here and a joint here just for grabbing onto that thing. Or I'm guessing, other things with this, he can grab onto little fish or something like that. Or dinosaur fish. But, he can carry his weapon. Now, let's take a look at his boss, conversely, who is not only one price point up, but comes with a sword. Now, you see this, he even knocks over his pal. It's disgusting, the levels of abuse Grimlock commits in this line. Because he comes with a massive sword, and guess what you can do with that? If you really stretch your imagination, you can stuff it in his mouth. Then he'll fall over and breathe fire on the flowers? Anyway, Grimlock and Snarl both, as far as I can tell, and as far as I've been told, don't have any way of storing their weapons whatsoever, whereas Swoop has a designed way of at least carrying his weapon. It's a massive plus, and it nets him big-time Vangelus bonus points. When I was talking about posability earlier, I was telling the truth. He has a cut joint right here, or not a cut joint, a pin joint. What am I saying? And it connects to his ball-jointed robot arms. Now, usually that would mean they're locked in place, but this is all designed so it all lines up just perfectly enough to allow for flapping, although the arm does detab now and then. If you hold it in place, he can flap his wings! Isn't that lovely? He can also move them, like this a little bit. He's surprisingly posable. And his legs, he can stand, right, like this. Or you can have him flying! Now, I don't know enough about dinosaurs to know whether or not this is accurate looking for a pterodactyl, but it does look very odd. However, if you ignore his legs, he looks great. And if you put his legs like this, he looks better. So, I've read a lot of bashing of his beast mode, dino mode, alt mode, whatever you want to call it, but it's really impressed me more than it has turned me away, so I've got to say I like it. You're free to your own opinion, of course, after we fight about it on the internet! Another really cool thing about this is you see his eye there, his metallic blue eye? That's on his robot head, so this guy's alt modes share the same eyeball. I think that's a really cool piece of design, too. His transformation is another deliciously, thoughtfully designed bit of toyness. He pretty much just stands like this. However, the things he does while standing like this are what make it so cool to me. You disconnect a whole lot of stuff, and there is a lot of tabs and pegs and things that aren't really solidly clipped, especially on his head. There's three main components here, and they don't really clip together whatsoever. That's a bit of a minus there. His legs pretty much straighten out, so that's kind of boring, but luckily that's the most boring part aside from his arms straightening out. The torso is where things really kick it up, and his backpack as well, which you have to kind of half-transform and rip the wings off in the process of all this. His wings, by the way, have something that some people have been, not really complaining about, but arguing about, as to whether or not it's the intent of the mold. There's one covered joint and one uncovered joint. Now, this isn't a plug, so these wings are actually molded differently with a hole. I'm not sure if that'll carry through to production, but package samples have been showing the same thing as I fail miserably to plug his wing backpack in. 1 second. Phew, good thing I didn't wuss out and edit that whole part while I tried to shove it back in there. His chest kind of divides and moves itself up here. Now, there's a whole lot of half-transforming, and then everything just kind of plugging back into place afterwards. And his chest is, like the G1 Swoop, his beak. And this part really does tab in nicely and tightly. And then there's special little cut grooves to go around the joint of his beak there. And now this all kind of sits here haphazardly, and you gotta hold it in place a little bit, then you open up the back of his neck, and this is another cool bit, his robot neck extends out just a little bit, so he has his crazy animated stick neck, so he can look around and be creepy and crow-like. Then the backpack tabs into the shoulders, which locks them and the wings in place. His head is on a ball joint, however it's a very uncovered ball joint, it barely cups it. This allows for a great range of movement, but also causes this to happen quite a bit. This isn't something that I would call a factor of perhaps a bad run, because this seems to be just a quirk of the design. There's a very small cup on that ball. Funny. And it's not really gonna be gripping it that well, but so long as you're careful moving his head around, things are gonna turn out okay there. Now, spinning his waist around is a really easy thing to miss, but it adds just enough detail down on the waist to be something I wouldn't want to skip out on. And then his wings kind of turn into a cool Neo coat. Like in The Matrix. You ever seen those movies? They got trench coats like them Columbine kids. It's gonna make all the kids kill each other. I swear. His robot mode is pretty lanky. However, in its lankiness, it's got a lot of character. That's the animated thing. The robot modes and the vehicle modes and the alt modes, they all got character. And this guy looks like the lanky assassin you'd think a flying, silent dinosaur robot would be. Of course, you all think exactly as I do. He's a big-time homage to the G1 Swoop, but his wings are swept down, although you can totally do the homage by bringing them up like that. Now, as I am talking about his silent assassin ways and whatnot, then you get his weapon, which is a giant mace. The way it clips into his hands is really nice. It's got two little slots, each cut perfectly for this finger and his thumb. So you can use it in either hand, and then it holds in pretty tightly so you can swing it around and then, you know, wreck the entire camera setup! Ah! You aren't getting this mace back until you pay me for all the cleanup I had to do. Oh, we're back on. He's got one huge problem that I'm going to point out right now. You may know this as being a pet peeve of mine if you've watched earlier reviews. Yes, it's the return of the palm-up hand. If you want to bend his elbow in a way that you'd expect an elbow to typically bend, like this, his palms will be up. If you want his hands to face a more natural direction, his elbows only bend sideways. However, unlike Black Arachnia and unlike Starscream, this somehow is less limiting than their own curling iron arms. I'm not sure how, but I seem to feel less limited pose-wise in what I can do with this guy, even though I think it's because his hands are so inhuman that they don't look quite as blatantly palm-up, like, you know, I'm making up standards as I go here, but it is a point that does irritate me, and if you're really irritated by these things as well, this may turn you off the toy, so I want to point that out. He also has a lot of ball joints, and it's very easy to misalign stuff. However, he's got one thing I really like, which is that his shoulder ball joint is just for this kind of stuff, but if you want to move up and down, there's a nice, simple cut joint. That's what I like about this toy, the combination of joint types, the way they're all precisely engineered to work with each other in tandem, it's a beautiful thing. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus. This has been Transformers Animated Swoop. This has been, now, I promise, my last Stolen Toys review, unless Hero gets something else in for cheap. And I hope that it's shed some light on this toy for you. By the way, he has a fairly shiny blue plastic, and shiny red plastic, and shiny gold plastic, but none of that seems to show up on the camera, so he's not as bland as he looks, I can assure you. I'm not a man! I'm an animal! An animal! I'd say pick him up, because as a deluxe, he really does fill out the price point nicely in terms of the positives. And his only big-time negative for me are the hands. Another negative would, of course, be the multi-part head assembly and the Dino mode not holding together very well, and the lack of really solidness to his Dino mode. But the Dino mode does so much stuff, and it does so much stuff it doesn't have to do, that it really outweighs that part for me. Anyway, as I said earlier, and as I seem to be saying multiple times lately, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, signing off for now. I hope that you stay tuned for future fun and excitement. Look out! It's the forces of Cobra! Don't worry, Swoop's on his way to harass them with his mace until they get irritated by the constant banging and go home!